Donald Trump is on something of a rampage through Asia, through Southeast Asia, where the locals have got him sussed. If you offer him something cheap, nasty, garish, vulgar, and that looks like gold, he is yours for life. In fact, when he was offered in South Korea today a crown, he said he'd like to wear it home. Take it out the wrapper. I don't want it wrapped. I don't need a gift box. Give me it now. I'll wear it on my head. And he wasn't joking. Supposedly, the Americans are involved in a no kings movement. Well, Donald Trump is definitely keen to be their king, and you wouldn't rule it out. But he does meet real life when he meets the Chinese President Xi Jinping in a day or so, when they begin to deal with the trade talks, with the tariff wars that have devastated the stock markets and devastated the supply lines of international business these last few months. Well, there's no doubt who won the tariff war. The West won the Opium War. The West definitely practiced a century of humiliation on China. But it's Donald Trump that faces humiliation in these talks. He is ready to drop entirely all the tariffs that he's imposed on China. Now, I lost count, you probably did too. How many and how much were the tariffs on the bewildering array of essential items that China sells to the United States of America? But you don't need to remember them now because they are all about to go. A harsh lesson has been learned, and not just by the United States. China's superpower status is not just in its armed forces. It's not just in its 1.45 billion population. It's not just in its soft power. It is in its hard economic power. A hard economic power that is now insurmountable. It seems the West have decided that China's power is here to stay, that it cannot be contained, that it cannot be rolled back. At least that's my take. Others have a different one. But it seems to me the meaning of the fantastic softening of Trump's rhetoric for the last few months, he's been virtually threatening war short of tomahawks. Economic war, for sure. He's been threatening it on China, and now he is not. And he's about to make a trade deal with China, which definitely establishes the truth of what China has just announced this very day, that China is no longer a developing country. If you've been to China, as we have in the last couple of weeks, the idea that China could be described as a developing country was always fantastic and absurd, but it's now official. Xi Jinping said China can no longer be described as a developing country. Sure, there's inequality between one man, one woman, and another. Sure, there's still dramatic inequality between one province and another. But the equalization of wealth is rapidly transforming China. Well, we're still in Minsk, and that's the capital of Belarus. As it happens, we're going by train to Moscow. But the other international guests at the Forum on Security are not so lucky. They don't have a visa necessarily to enter Russia from Belarus, and we're hoping to get back home, either to European countries or North America or even further afield, but they now cannot, because NATO has told the yapping chihuahuas in Latvia and Lithuania to close their borders on the absurd pretext, the old China pretext actually, that unauthorized balloons have been spotted in the sky, and until we know who sent them and for what, well, there'll be no traffic. So most people came by train or car through Latvia or through Lithuania, but they will not be leaving that way. European Union customers are supposed to be exempt, but they have not turned out yet to be. My point is that the onslaught against Belarus, totally unjustified, which has done nothing to anybody, hasn't fired a shot at anybody, is still continuing. And of course the reason is because Belarus stands with Russia. But then most of the world stands with Russia, and we're going to make ourselves a lot of enemies in Western countries if we keep this pretense up much longer that you can sanction Russia to surrender. This very evening there is a twin military collapse going on in the Ukrainian armed forces, and that place I've told you about so often that you're probably calling your sons Kupyansk is about to fall finally to the Russian armed forces. But it's not the only one. Right across the line, right across the front line, the Russian armed forces are carrying all before them, and the number of Ukrainian forces surrendering with a promise of a safe conduct from Russia is now rapidly increasing. Thousands are expected in the next couple of days because 10,500 Ukrainian soldiers are now trapped in a kessel, the kind that von Paulus was trapped in Stalingrad in 1944. That has now been the fate of a big Ukrainian army. 10,500 men are now in negotiation to surrender. And the territory thus captured is strategically vital to the Ukrainian war effort. And it's distinctly possible. We'll talk to Scott Ritter, the real expert, about this later in the show. But it's distinctly possible that before there can be a meeting in Budapest, this war might be over. The Ukrainians have decided they don't want to die for Zelensky. They don't want to die for the corrupt oligarchy that sustains him in power. And they're voting with their feet. Either their men surrendering at the front or their men and women fleeing the country. 9 million Ukrainians have fled the country. And some of them are quite patriotic still. Some of them still support the war effort, but not to the extent of actually joining it. They are the same kind of draft dodgers that Donald Trump once was. Donald Trump dodged 4 drafts, and that's why he's never seen war up close and personal. That's why it's all some kind of joke to him. He had bone spurs, the poor lamb. It didn't stop him having a lifetime of swinging golf clubs across even his own golf courses, and it didn't stop him dancing, including today, to YMCA. I don't know if anyone's told Donald yet. It's an international gay anthem, but he does love dancing to it. And his bone spurs miraculously seem to have cured themselves. I mention that because Donald Trump's about to enter yet another war. It's an extraordinary thing that the man who calls himself the peace president, the man who really thinks he's got a chance of the Nobel Peace Prize, is about to start gratuitously, for no reason whatsoever, another war. Don't tell me it's about fentanyl, as Senator Rand Paul pointed out the other day. Venezuela supplies none of the fentanyl which enters the United States. Not, he said, not much of it, none of it. It all comes through Mexico. It has nothing to do with Venezuela. And if you're believing the casus belli, that Trump is going to invade, attack, bomb Venezuela because of drug cartels, you are such an idiot. You should not be watching the mother of all talk shows. And I advise you to switch off right now. If you believe that this has anything to do with drugs, you are an idiot. There's no drugs coming to the United States from Venezuela, least of all in boats that would require 40 refuelings if they were to reach Miami. I mean, as ferrying illegal drugs go, sending a boat, a speedboat from Venezuela to the coast of Miami would just be the most ridiculous way you could possibly imagine. No, these extrajudicial killings, well, let's call them what they are, these acts of murder on the high seas that the Americans are boasting about, that the White House is posting as official White House films, and that the American military are being ordered to carry out, these are pure and simple acts of mass murder. And many of the people murdered so far haven't even been Venezuelans. Never mind not Venezuelan drug traffickers. They were Colombian citizens, fishermen. They were from Trinidad and Tobago, which inexplicably is participating in the war drive that Donald Trump is currently garnering. Ironically, in Trinidad and Tobago, there's a full battle group. There's aircraft carriers, battleships, and the whole area is now bristling with fighter jets and with the B-1 bombers that presumably will be dropping their ordnance on downtown Caracas sometime soon. There's no doubt that the U.S. can shell from the sea the people of Venezuela. There's no doubt that they can fire missiles at them. There's no doubt that they can bomb them from on high, but they can't occupy Venezuela. I'm here to tell you that. First of all, the U.S. doesn't have enough soldiers to invade Venezuela, which is a truly gigantic country, which is, as my good friend Garland Nixon put it, either jungle or mountain or mountains with jungle. It is the ideal place for a guerra prolongada. That's what you're in for, Donald. A guerra prolongada, prolonged war. And any American occupation forces stationed in Venezuela will be going home in boxes in very large numbers. So if you are the mother or father of an American serviceman, I advise you to do everything that you can to dissuade Donald Trump from this course. And that's even before we calibrate the fact that Russia has just signed a strategic partnership, including a military partnership with Venezuela, as has China, as has Iran. So if you really want World War III to be waged in the barrios, in the mountains, in the jungles of Venezuela, well, be my guest. One part of me hopes that you do, because the United States is behaving like a man-child, like a delinquent child. Trump said today, any country we make war on, we will destroy it. He is behaving like a caricature, like a Bugsy Malone kid's caricature of the Mafia 5 families. He is disgracing the great people of the United States with the threats, vulgar, base threats that he is now daily, even hourly, engaged upon. I need to move on because there are many, many issues that we're going to touch on tonight. If, like me, you've seen some of the horrors that happened over the last day or two after a prolonged siege of more than 400 days, the rebel forces, the RSF, backed by certain Arabian Gulf countries, they finally broke the siege. They finally entered the territory they'd been besieging, and they proceeded to cold-bloodedly massacre the people inside. Mothers with their babies, old men, young women being raped, and none of this is hostile propaganda claims. All of this was filmed by the Sudanese rebels that we used to call the Janjaweed themselves. They took the videos of themselves cold-bloodedly massacring people for no reason, people on their knees begging for mercy, ruthlessly and brutally murdered on the cameras of their murderers, and then put on social media by their murderers. Whoever is arming these people, whoever is backing these people, whoever in any way is enabling these people, should this evening hang their heads in black burning shame. If I or anybody associated with me had supported what we've seen today on social media and the boasts of mass rapes taking place, I would never be able to show my face in public again. And I hope that those who have facilitated this will now bring it dramatically and immediately to an end. This nihilistic, anarchistic, this brutal, sadistic, demonic violence is enough almost to make you lose your faith in human nature. And when you hear the name of God being chanted as the crime is being committed by the criminal that's committing it and videoing it so he can put it out later, you begin to lose all kinds of faith, I must say. I never had any faith that Israel was going to observe a ceasefire in Gaza, and my lack of faith was definitely not misplaced. 98 Palestinians were murdered yesterday. 74 of them were women and children. It was a frenzy of murderous violence endorsed by the Vice President and the President of the United States, endorsed by the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. And Israel has just said the ceasefire is back in place. We had our frenzy. We murdered our 100 Palestinian women and children mainly. But now the ceasefire's on again, and the Americans are taking credit for it. We've got so much to discuss tonight, and we've got two of our biggest and best guests. First, Professor Syed Mohammed Marandi from Tehran. He's up first to talk about the events in the Middle East region. And then, later in the show, the one and only Scott Ritter to talk about the dramatic events taking place right now in the Donbass in Ukraine. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.